I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We've done a number of these webinars for the SunForAll Solar Fund, and we're very excited today to have the San Diego Center for Children join us. We actually have two guests, which is great. We have Moises Barone. He's the president and CEO of the San Diego Center for Children, and Christy Worley. She's the director of philanthropy. And it's great to have both of you join us today. Thank you very much. And Lee Barkin, the Chief Community Officer of Collective Sun. So I want to just briefly go off, talk a little bit about the agenda and just a couple quick things, and I'll hand it over to Lee to talk a little bit about Collective Sun. And as we move through the webinar, please ask any and all questions that you have in the Q&A function on Zoom. We will, if we can't answer them in real time, we will. But we will have a very thorough Q&A at the end of the webinar. The webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. So please ask any question that you have, and we'll be very happy to answer it. The agenda is, we're going to talk briefly about Collective Sun, who we are. Oh, and by the way, I'm your host, Matt Brennan. I work with Collective Sun. Didn't introduce myself at the beginning. We're going to talk briefly about Collective Sun, and we're going to move into the SunForAll Solar Fund. And this is an exciting initiative that Collective Sun has put together with the BQuest Foundation here in San Diego, and we're going to talk a little bit about BQuest. And then we'll hand off to Moises and Christy. They're going to share about the San Diego Center for Children, all the great work they do here in San Diego. They've been doing it for over 100 years, one of the oldest nonprofits in San Diego. And they're going to talk about their solar journey with us. It's been a great project. We're going to talk about that and the savings that we all anticipate. And then we're going to move into the Q&A, which is always an interesting, it turns out a lot of times, well, my favorite part of these webinars. So I'd like to hand it off to Lee. Lee, if you could join us, talk a little bit about Collective Sun, and we'll move into SunForAll.
Thanks, Matt, and a special welcome to Moises and Christy. Thank you very much for joining us today, and to all of our participants for this webinar all about SunForAll and the San Diego Center for Children. Collective Sun is a solar financing company that works with nonprofit organizations throughout the country. And on the next slide, you'll see that we have over 160 projects with nonprofits in 20 different states. And Matt, if you want to advance to the next slide. Yeah, so over 160 projects across 20 different states, over $60 million worth of projects. And with that experience over the years, we've learned that nonprofits are unique. They're very different and important and special in all of their missions. But when it comes to their solar projects, they have a couple of things in common. They have very similar challenges. They have challenges with asking, how do we pay for this project? How do we get it funded? And how do we build the project and get it built properly? And so on the next slide, Matt, if you could advance, we have created the SunForAll Solar Fund in collaboration with our partner BQuest Foundation, who is an amazing organization that I encourage you to visit, check out their website, that has supported this concept of impact investing. And the SunForAll Solar Fund is the answer to those questions. How do we pay for this project? And how do we get it built and built properly? Our primary mission, the sort of focus of this program, is to create projects that generate savings from day one for the nonprofit. And that means there has to be a financial and economically compelling project for this to advance. And we do that by looking at the finances and breaking it down into two components. There's a tax component for these projects. And I know you say we're a nonprofit, we don't pay taxes, but there are solar tax credits that are available. And we're going to help you figure out this tax credit portion of the solar project. And then whatever is left over, we're going to finance with a low interest loan. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And as a, on the next slide, but as a side note, I do want to mention that just this week, there is pending legislation in Washington, D.C. that could dramatically enhance this process. And we are very excited about this legislation and we hope it passes. But if you are watching the web archive of this video, please do contact us. If you're in 2022 in the future from, we're back here in November, there may be updates and we'll be happy to share those updates with you, but we're anticipating that some of these economics could get even better, but do contact us and we'll let you know how the story ended. But even under today's current economics, there's going to be, as I mentioned, a tax component and there's going to be a loan component. So let's take a hypothetical example. This picture that you're seeing here is a real project. That's our Vista Community Clinic project that we did with the SunForAll Solar Fund. But let's just take a hypothetical project that costs $500,000. With a collective Sun discount and utilizing these tax benefits, there's going to be a 12% or more. Again, by next year, this could be 15%, it could be 30%. There could be some really exciting things happening there. But there's going to be some component that's a tax benefit that we're going to help you figure out. And then whatever is left over, we're going to provide as a 10-year loan at 3.5% interest. So if you take this hypothetical $500,000 project and you have a $60,000 discount for this tax benefit, you're left with $440,000 that you have to finance. So if you took a $440,000 loan and you were paying 3.5% over 10 years, that means every year you're going to have this $52,000 a year payment. Next slide, please. So if there's a $52,000 a year obligation for this loan, the utility savings for these projects had better be more than $52,000 a year. In this hypothetical example, it's a $57,000 a year savings. And we're going to help you figure out all of the project economics for your individual project and your particular site and location. But in this example, there's a project that has savings from day one. That is the central theme to remember from this webinar. So if your utility savings are $57,000 a year and your loan is costing $52,000 a year, that means there's going to be savings in year one of $5,000. And if you look at this chart, in that first year, there's that little green bar. And in this chart, you're going to pick up on two different themes here. One is that there's this big jump at the end of year 10. So what that represents is the loan is paid off. And then after that loan is paid off, you're enjoying 100% savings from this solar project. So there's a big jump at the end of year 10. But the other thing you might notice is that each year, that green bar is getting a little bit bigger. And that's because your loan payment is staying the same, but utility rates keep going up every year. And as those utility rates go up, you're not subject to those rate escalations. You're hedged or protected against those future increases. So there's more and more savings every year. So they start small, they grow every year, and then they have a huge jump at the end of year 10. But when you add up all of those green bars across that chart, it's a lot of savings. And in this example, the lifetime savings, 1.5 million, is pretty significant. So that's the economic side of how projects work, savings from day one. Next slide, please. The SunForAll Solar Fund then is a combination of these benefits. There's a technical support wraparound. We provide a free technical review and project feasibility study. And we also provide construction management and post-construction support. Then there is the tax piece we're going to help you figure out, and then a loan for the remaining portion. And next slide, please. Now, when you start looking at the fine print, it gets even better. During that period when the construction is happening, there are still payments that are being made to that solar installer. But we don't charge any interest and we don't have any payments that are due until the project is complete. So let me say that again. Payment holiday during the construction period. And you're actually going to receive a grant for the interest that otherwise would have been due during that construction period, so that there are no payments until the system goes live and it's generating the solar savings. There's also no origination fees. So there's no application fees. There's no points like a typical loan often has from a traditional lending source or banks and so forth. And then most importantly, there's no collateral requirements beyond the equipment itself. So we're not attaching to real estate. There's other loans. You go to a bank, they want you to put up collateral and you have to pledge your building or other assets or have restricted cash, or we get rid of all of those headaches. The loan is a very nonprofit friendly, it's a philanthropic oriented type of loan that is designed to be supportive of the nonprofits that we work with. Next slide, please. Okay, I touched on this a little bit. We talked about figuring out how to pay for the solar system. And I also mentioned nonprofits also struggle with how to get the project built and built right. So the first question when you apply for the SunForAll Solar Fund is to understand, does solar make sense in your location? So we're going to request your energy usage data. How much energy are you using? What times of the day are you using the energy? All of this bundle of data. And with that information, we're going to develop our own basic layout and design to determine the optimal system size and understand how much power that's going to generate and what kind of savings that power is going to generate. And keep in mind, we're not the solar installer. We're performing a very similar task to what a solar installer will do, but we're looking at this through the lens of the nonprofit. So when we say an optimal system size, what we mean is an optimal system size for the nonprofit. That may be filling the entire roof with the biggest system possible, and it may not be. And so the analysis is driven through ROI and economic benefit for the nonprofit. And in addition, even after the feasibility study is done, and then there's a vendor selection process, and the construction starts, we roll up our sleeves to make sure that the project gets built and it gets built right. So we are involved in the construction management process, and we also have a construction completion report at the end of the process, which is kind of like an inspection, our own inspection, if you will, on top of the inspections done by the city and by the utility. We're also doing a report to ensure this project got built right. There's over 100 different checks that we perform. There's pages and pages of photos, 100, 200 photos that get taken of every component, and every, wires are checked and double checked and triple checked. This is a construction project. And, that making sure that product that gets delivered to the nonprofit is the same one that, was planned for and ordered is paramount to ensuring the lifetime success of this project, that it functions and performs the way it's intended to. So we're really performing this role of a solar guide, if you will, to help you navigate, this entire process. Next slide, please. We've done, over $5.6 million, $5.7 million worth of projects just in the last year or two. And I'm very excited to announce that just a month ago, we have secured funding for the next $10 million of projects for the SunForAll Solar Fund. And we are excited to deploy these funds and help more nonprofits go solar. Next slide, please. Okay, to qualify, there's a couple of things you need to do. One, be a valid and current 501c3. Also, having the ability to go out and secure some solar bids. Now, if you don't already have solar bids, that's fine. If you don't know any solar installers, that's fine. We can help you with all of that process. And also add that, we do have priority for organizations that are doing, located in or serving underserved communities, marginalized communities, and promoting social or economic equity. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. If you could advance to help you understand how we really make these decisions, how those decisions are made. There is an independent loan review committee. So that's actually independent of Collective Sun, but they're looking at three different things. One is, what is the social impact? Now, this is the story that you already, as a nonprofit, tell, and you tell every day, and you tell it very well. And so we're going to understand, what is that social impact? What is that role you're providing in serving your community? And that's part of that the comments I made on the last slide about social impact, that is a factor. So this is a little different than a typical bank that's looking at just your economics. We're looking at a couple different things. One is, who are you and what's the great work you're doing in your community? Number two is the nonprofit's financial position. So that's a more traditional underwriting kind of process. You know, do you have the ability to repay the loan? But because we are doing projects that are saving money from day one, these projects are always economic for the nonprofits. So whatever the financial position is, it's only going to be improved with a solar project. The solar project economics, not all solar projects are equal. Some are going to generate more savings than others. It may depend on engineering considerations. Do you have a southern facing roof? It could be what part of the country you're in and what kind of utility avoided costs and solar, benefits that are available in your particular geography. But we're going to look at, what are the economic benefits of that solar project itself. And those are the three items that independent loan review committee is looking at when they're making decisions about who gets approved and who doesn't get approved. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it off to Moises, who is going to tell us all about the San Diego Center for Children and their amazing work in our community.
Thank you, Lee, very much. I really want to start by thanking Bequest and Collective Sun for their support. Actually, everything that you heard Lee describe has happened, and it has been really invaluable for us. So let me talk a little bit about the center, and then we'll talk about our journey and our process to see if that will be of some help for those of you who are thinking about this possibility. We are the oldest nonprofit serving children in San Diego. We were founded in 1887, so next year we're going to be celebrating 135 years. And we provide a range of therapeutic and educational services to children and youth and families with mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. We have 8 locations throughout the county of San Diego. And in our main campus that you're going to see a picture in a little while, we have 12 acres, which is where we're really doing this project. So the services that we provide range from prevention to be able to being embedded in pediatric practices to provide therapeutic help there, to outpatient services. We do a lot of work in the community. We do a lot of work with foster youth as well. We have a residential treatment program for youth that are experiencing more significant challenges. We also have a non-public school, and we also do a lot of work in different school settings throughout the county of San Diego. So we really have an opportunity to impact many people, about 10,000 people a year, about 1,000 every single day. And as many of you know, unfortunately, we are experiencing a mental health crisis that has been really deemed to be a collective crisis in the nation. So the services that we provide are very, very significant and needed. So that's part of the reason why we were also very appreciative of the opportunity to do this. So I wonder we can go to the next slide. So here you have a picture of our process, of our campus. And in describing our process, when we started to talk with Collective Sun about the SunForAll project, it was really important for us to be able to understand, like you're hearing now, the different components, because at the beginning, it can be a little bit confusing or challenging, but I think Lee did a great job with the slides and be able to describe it. And the key issue here is to be able to understand the different components. That to begin with, you get that rebate that bring the price of installing solar down in a significant way. The second component is the loan that is really unbiddable in terms of the terms. And I know that being a nonprofit, whenever we hear loan or I talk with my board about the term loan, some questions are raised. So what was really, really key in our mind, and what really helped solidify the decision for us and our board, was the fact that, first of all, we don't make any payments until the project is completed. And that is a really key element. There's really, you can put value to that in terms of dollars, but that is really, really significant, because the idea here is that the savings that you have from the project completion is what you're going to use to pay the loan. So there is nothing out of pocket in reality. And at the end of the day, there are actually some extra savings that we are going to be using to put back into our programs. So it's really a win-win-win. And you saw at the end of the day, the very significant savings that take place. So you're going to see in a minute the specific numbers, I believe, on our project. But I think that there's a couple other components that are important here. Number one is that we wanted to do something to be able to contribute to the environment. And for us, this was very appealing. It's not just the financial piece, it's that really what being able to contribute to be able to take care of our environment. And given the work that we do in a therapeutic and educational point of perspective, to be able to use this as a way to be able to help our staff and the youth that we serve be able to understand the value of doing this became very, very important. And the last thing that I want to say, trust me that we had very little, if any, experience with solar. The technical assistance that was there and available and the expertise that was there and available for us throughout the whole process in making the initial decisions, in the reviewing the bids, and then moving forward as we continue with the construction of the project is really invaluable. And I think it's difficult to put a dollar value on that expertise because honestly, having that backing and that expertise and that access is really what made us feel a sense of confidence about moving forward with the project. Okay, so something I just wanted to describe very quickly in terms of our own project. When we started to look at this, we were thinking like many others that maybe we were going to use, you see a picture of our whole campus here, that we were going to use the roofs of some of the buildings to be able to install the solar panels and be able to bring solar to our whole facility, again, our 12 acres. But after really thinking about it, it became clear that there were some concerns about it. Number one, the age of our buildings. Number two, we work with youth that experience behavioral challenges. So that also was something that we needed to be concerned about in terms of potential access to the roof. And we landed with a solution that we hadn't considered before, again, thanks to the technical assistant, which is to install carports in this kind of, on the left of your screen, this area that you see that we call the dirt lot, because we acquired that land from the state just a few years ago. So that we're going to convert that in, it's already our parking area for our staff, but we're going to put carports there. So that was something that we hadn't considered, and it became a win-win. Again, thanks to the technical assistance that we received throughout the whole project. Next slide. So I think, Lee, you're going to talk a little bit about our specific numbers.
Yeah, maybe I can just share a couple highlights on the project economics. So the project has savings from day one. So in the first year, we're enjoying actual savings with no out-of-pocket costs, as Moises mentioned. But then over the lifetime, there's this $2 million of projected lifetime savings, which is significant. But the environmental benefits, which Moises kind of touched on, are worth exploring a little bit. We tend to look at numbers and spreadsheets and 8.8 million kilowatt hours, but what does that really mean? And you try to convert that into the number of trees that are planted or vehicle miles traveled. But for San Diego Center for Children, you work every day with challenging situations and supporting the social emotional well-being of children in today's challenges, and at the same time, you're also addressing the future challenges of the world that they're inheriting. So how did you sort of balance those things with the financial benefits of a project, but also the environmental benefits? What were the motivators or kind of drivers for you folks?
So, for us, what you're mentioning was really, those were factors that were very, very crucial. At the beginning, the whole idea of being able to rely completely on solar energy was very attractive. But as we started to look into that, we were thinking, okay, how are we going to do this? What's going to be the cost associated with this? So that's why having the support and the expertise was so very helpful. It was really not difficult at all to be able to help our staff, to be able to help our board and our advisory council to be able to understand the value of this. Because in some ways, with what we're doing here, we're really taking a lead role in our community, because if you look around where we are, you don't see a lot of solar projects. You don't see a lot of different areas that are taking advantage of solar. So for us to be able to be one of the first organizations in the area and buildings in the area that will be able to do that, we hope that will also inspire others. And like I said before, it provides a wonderful opportunity for us to make a statement about our values in terms of not only the services that we provide every day, how we care for the environment, but also to provide an opportunity to teach our youth and our staff about the importance of this.
So let's talk a little bit about how this got started, and maybe I can invite Christy into the conversation if you want to unmute your microphone as well. Where did the idea come from? Because for so many nonprofits, they struggle with just the day-to-day activities, and you flip a light switch and the lights turn on, and you don't always think about where your energy is coming from. What was the light switch moment for San Diego Center for Children to think, we should be looking at solar?
So I'll start, and then I'll have Christy also share about the connections that she made. Actually, we had an opportunity to have a small project installation of solar in our campus, which we were grateful for. We had an opportunity to grant to do so. So we had already experienced a little bit of a taste. And we kept thinking, if we could do this for the whole county, wouldn't this be amazing? So that's something that really was very attractive to us. And then Christy can talk a little bit about the specifics.
We were engaged with a supporter of the center who connected us to the Beecrest Foundation. And I have to say right off the bat, it was very intimidating. Director of Philanthropy doesn't know much about solar energy or the technical details that go with that, but we definitely wanted to start the conversation and be engaged because, as Moises said, we were thrilled with the cost savings from the smaller project that we had at our non-public school. So we started the process. And as most of you know on this call, you work for a nonprofit. This became my other duty as assigned. And I was, working with Lee and his team on how to coordinate all the visits and the coordination of this entire project. So learned a lot about solar and the journey. And I joke because now I know where all of our power generators and are located around campus. So if there is an emergency, I know exactly what to do. But it's been an interesting journey. And one thing that I will say off the bat, I kept thinking for sure, because I wasn't grasping how everybody was connected. But Collective Sun was fantastic in connecting us to the companies that were able to come out to help us with the bid process. And all of the organizations were fantastic to work with. And then I kept thinking that there was going to be hidden money, like we were going to have to pay for something eventually, like something was going to come out. So there was that fear, again, not understanding how everyone was connected. But Lee and his team were excellent along the way and guaranteeing us that this we're going to handle this. This is what's happening. We did experience a few speed bumps along the way, but we were able to work it out in the end. So that was our experience. From any questions from the Director of Philanthropy, learning about solar, but again, thrilled with the cost savings, because this is, again, money that's going back to our programs and services that's much needed.
And let me just add to that we can't wait for our fire alarms that you just heard to be powered by the solar energy.
I assume that was just a drill.
It was.
It was a drill.
It would be a lot louder if not, so my apologies.
No problem whatsoever. Let's talk about some of those speed bumps. You have folks in the audience now who are at the place you were at, I don't know, a year ago, and they're contemplating what's ahead. What do you wish someone would have said to you a year ago about what's in store and what's involved in a construction project? And is there anything you sort of wish you would have known then that you know now?
I have to say that the idea of having these webinars is excellent, because I have to say that if we had been able to be exposed to the information the way it's being described now, it would have been extremely helpful to be able to be clear about how the mechanism works. I think it's a very clever approach. It's a win-win-win. and you don't find those very frequently. So I think that's something that is important. I think that what was also very helpful for us is to be able to get the support, to get all the appropriate information, because we needed to talk with our board. Anytime that we're going to acquire some debt, we need to have a conversation with our board. So to be able to help them understand, we needed to really get a very good understanding of this so that we could then in turn explain it to our board and get the support. And last but not least, I'm glad that also these webinars taking place, because I want you to know, those of you that are contemplating this, that the support is there. And that I think is absolutely invaluable, because we wouldn't know exactly where to begin or how to go about it. So we were able to secure the bids. They were very different, and there was quite a range. So that's why I think it's a very good idea to secure the bids. But I think that Collective Sun and SunForAll allow you to really make sure that you feel comfortable that the bid is a good one, that there is substance to it, that you can rely on the information that is being provided. So having that kind of technical expertise looking at it makes us feel a sense of certainty that we're making a good decision. So once we were able to do that, it was just a matter of just initiating the project and contributing it. Now with COVID, there has been delayed with permits, so that's something that you need to contemplate as well in our different communities. But the project will move forward, and we have received the equipment, and we're looking forward to the next stage.
Incredible, and quite an adventure over the last 135 years. If I understand correctly, I think the utility company in your area was established just 5 or 6 years prior. So you've really spanned the dawn of electricity to the evolution of solar, and carrying that torch into the future.
One of the things, Lee, I like about the center is that 135 years old, we are here because we continue to meet the needs of the community. And going forward, our future, this is the future for these larger organizations to continue to be sustainable in our environment. So we're very grateful to have this opportunity.
How many pandemics have you been through as the organization? It's
2.
Impressive.
True.
Yeah, an impressive longevity and an amazing work that you do in the community. At this stage, I think I'm going to invite Matt Brennan back. If you've been monitoring all the great questions that have been coming in, are there any questions for any of the three of us, Matt, that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there has been some great questions. Now, Lee, I think this is best for you. This was from Austin. So Lee, you talked, and both Moises and Christy commented on this, just sort of the process of the technical feasibility analysis and the work Collective Sun did to help with that. And there was a question about the 3 criteria. Are they, first of all, let's talk about the feasibility analysis, but the criteria that they're a 501c3 is one, and then that their mission, that this values alignment. Are all those things equally weighted for the loan review committee? So
yeah, so there's a rubric that they have, which they go through, and they rate each of those on a scale. And so yes, there is weighting, equal weighting for those components, but that process is so different than a traditional loan review committee, which is strictly looking at financial implications and financial ratios and just those components. I think they really appreciate the work that nonprofits do to make our communities better places. And so those are all balanced in that conversation. The nonprofit having a good mission, having financial sustainability that this project will ultimately help and support, and then a solid solar project that can actually deliver on those savings.
thanks for that. And there's a number of questions that came up that are just sort of the basic questions about the availability of this program. And again, this Lee, I have other questions for Moises and Christy, but Lee, can you answer, you did touch on it earlier, but where is this available across the country?
Sure. So we can operate in all 50 states, and there are some nuances in some utility service territories that have limitations and restrictions for the third-party ownership model. Now, that actually may change. I mentioned there's this pending legislation. That may change for next year. So it's not just the state that you're in, it's also the utility that you're in. And in some states, there are hundreds of municipal utilities. So definitely reach out to us. I will say that if you are familiar with solar projects, we can operate in places that do not allow what are called power purchase agreements. So for example, if you're in Los Angeles does not allow PPAs, but they do allow our structure. Other parts of the country that have certain restrictions, we can't operate in. So we have, projects in 20 different states, but we actually could do more. So please do reach out. And we can share information about your specific state and utility service territory.
Thank you, Lee. This is a question for either Moises or Christy. When you chose your contractor, could you talk a little bit more about that? First of all, the number of quotes you got, and why did you choose the contract? Why did you go with the contractor that you did? And was it the cheapest? Was it the least expensive bid?
Yeah, let me start, and then I'll punt it to Christy, who was also very involved in the process and was tremendously helpful in helping coordinate all of this. For us, there were a couple of components. First, we needed to really have some conversations and get the technical assistant to make a decision of what was going to be the best project, as I described before. So that was an important thing to land on. And depending on who you are and your facility, there might be different options to consider. And it's important to know that. So be able to land on that was important. Once we made the decision of where we were going to locate this, we were able to get the bids. At the end of the day, yes, the bid that we ended up selecting was a lower bid, significantly lower bid. And this is what I mentioned before, but we felt a sense of assurance about accepting that lower bid because we had access to the technical assistant provided by Collective Sun and SunForAll initiative to be able to help us identify that we didn't have to be concerned that we were accepting a lower bid because it was totally fine. It was a great contractor and provider, and that all the checks were there. I wouldn't have known how to start that process or how to make that decision. Obviously, it was very nice to be able to accept the lower bid. And in this case, that's what it worked. I don't know, Christy, if there's anything you have to add to that.
No, the company that we ended up choosing from, we ended up going with, we had two bids that we were unsuccessful receiving the third bid. But the two, they were great. The company we ended up going with was, I feel like our relationship was able to work a little bit closely with us and have a better understanding of our environment and our youth and our programs and services and our needs, and was very flexible in meeting our questions and answers and providing all of the necessary information that we needed going forward to present to our board and to our senior leadership as well. So it came down to the relationship at the end, and luckily, it was actually a little bit cheaper.
And you might be thinking this question, I don't know if this has come up, but the reason we encourage a robust competitive bidding process is to protect the interests of the nonprofit. If you're in the audience and you've already got your 3 bids and you've picked one, we're not going to make you do that process over again. That's not the point of that exercise. The point is to ensure the best option for the nonprofit is available. We don't have a pony in the race, whatever metaphor you want to use, in which vendor is selected, but we want to ensure that those best interests are aligned as much as possible to get the best deal for the nonprofit.
Thank you, everyone. And this question, I think, is best answered by Lee. There's a number of questions about, again, who qualifies for SunForAll. You already touched on it, but there were questions. Would a school, for example, qualify for this? Can you just talk a little bit about that, the types of nonprofits and missions served that are best suited for SunForAll?
Sure. So, 501c3, doing good work in your community, and, solar economics have to make sense. We want to do projects that are going to save the nonprofit money from day one. That is the mission of the fund. So, there's some parts of the country where those economics are not going to pencil, but that's changing constantly. It's changing with improvements in technology. It's changing with price, new solar installers and competition. And so every day there's a new city or part of the country that is becoming economically viable for these projects. But you really have to do the work and understand that in that technical feasibility study, does solar make sense in this particular geography?
Thank you. And Christy and Moises, either of you can answer this question as well. Could you just do a kind of a quick recap on just what was necessary to get the ball rolling with the nonprofit? Because I've seen this where a lot of times it requires an internal champion, someone who just wants to push this through. And we have, Moises' support and Christy's support, which was great. But can you talk a little bit just about that if you were to advise another nonprofit on how to go about this, just some words of wisdom that maybe you learned through this?
So I'll share a couple of thoughts. I'm sure Christy may have also some ideas in terms of her own experience. I think it starts with mission. Really, that's really what everything starts. And in many ways, based on the work that we do, what we're trying to accomplish and the impact that we try to have in our community, for us to be able to be thinking about the environment and to be able to think about being more sustainable that way was really a very key component. So it needs to start with values and being mission center, because everything we do starts there. I think that the second component is we always look, as a nonprofit, we always try to identify how to stretch those dollars, how we can do more with the resources that we have. And to be thinking, and actually we got a chance to experience some of those potential increases in utilities costs that we experience from year to year. That creates a sense of uncertainty, because you never know, even for planning purposes, from year to year, what exactly is going to happen. So that was also a concern. And once we were able to get a better sense and an understanding of the model, which, like I say, I think is extremely clever and it's a win-win-win, then it was a non-issue. I mean, it was very easy to be able to help everybody understand the value of this project from an environmental point of view, from an educational point of view, and at the end of the day, also significantly so from a financial point of view. So there was no argument against it. Nobody could think of any way to push back in any way, shape, or form. Christy?
I agree. I actually was the internal champion because that's exactly what Moises said. Moises and I saw the value in this, and we really worked hard. It was a lot. The paperwork and what was required to submit on the front end was a lot of work. But again, working with Collective Sun and trying to gain an understanding of what we really needed, the timeline and the deadlines that were needed to go in, they were really flexible and were able to work with us and understood that we didn't have many people here to help us with that process. So really communicate with them and share, your limitations going forward and what you're going to need on there, what they can help provide you, because they really do understand that there's, most of us don't have a lot of staff and we're not able to, take that time, depending on the time of year that this is happening as well. So I think that's what I would, really keep that line of communication open with them, because that's the key. That's the most important, and really let them know what you're working under. And then engaging on our end was really engaging our facilities team. They were invaluable in helping to navigate where all our boxes were located, our energy usage, where that happened. So really keeping, and they had to be here, a lot to be here for the studies and for the companies to come in and answer some of the logistical and technical questions as well, because there's also the thing that once the equipment starts coming in, there's sort of a time period before the project starts. So you do need to have the space. You need to think about this of where you're going to put the equipment in the meantime. So depending on your situation and your nonprofit, we had to be really thoughtful of where we can't let our youth be near something like that. So we needed to think about all of these steps. And so again, the company that we chose to work with, very flexible, very understanding, and is able to work with us throughout this process.
I love this question because it's not really about solar or spreadsheets, it's about consensus building. And San Diego Center for Children was a delight to work with because they're such a well-run organization, and Moises and Christy as leaders and champions for this project. But not everybody has that same experience. And if you're on this webinar and listening, you may have you may be here because a stakeholder said, why aren't we going solar? or you may be that stakeholder going to the leadership in asking, why don't we have solar? And so there is a consensus building process. Even things that are obvious still take a Christy, an internal champion, to shepherd through that process. And because we work with so many different kinds of nonprofits, it really does vary. I mean, there are some on the environmental scale side of the scale that are very environmentally motivated. Maybe it's even part of their mission. But there are others that aren't at all. And this is a financial consideration. And really understanding, the culture of your organization and what are those key points is critical to advancing any kind of, consensus-based activity. But solar checks all these boxes: saving money for the organization, creating benefits for the environment, all of these considerations create that win-win-win. And so we can help you in that process as well, sharing some resources and connecting with other people in your particular industry who've gone solar, worked with us, or people. These days, solar is abundant. There's many examples of solar success stories to create comfort, inside of your organization.
Yeah, one thing, Lee, I'd like to add is that because of this project going forward, we've spoken to potential partners in the community and additional funders, and people are really excited because this sort of did open up our opportunity to be eligible for additional funding. So with environmental programs, and we're partnering with different nonprofits that work in that space as well. So this really did open up our ability to look at how we get additional funding in different ways and creative partnerships within the community to create more impact and community engagement, all the way from gardening with harnessing the solar energy and using making community gardens, which will then help engage our community as well as our youth. There's just so much more potential out there, so we're really excited about the future.
Christy, that's really interesting. I didn't think of that by doing this, that would open up other opportunities for funding, and that may be different across the country. But I would love to hear more about that. That is fantastic. But I do have another follow-up question. I was triggered by everyone's conversation in that, and this is actually a question for Lee. We talked a little bit about, identifying an internal champion and someone to really, guide this process internally and to get consensus and buy-in. And Moises talked about, look, there's a huge environmental benefit, and that's all, being more and more recognized, and then the financial benefits. But how does someone get started in the process? I know from Collective Sun's standpoint, we ask nonprofits for some information, Lee. And there's some questions here about what is it that you need to kind of kick this off. You talked about a feasibility analysis. What are the things, and I know we try to ask for as little as possible, but what are those things that will be asked for to get the ball rolling?
Sure. So your starting point is SunForAll.com. And we have a very simple application intake form to gather information and start that process. But the information that we need is pretty simple. It's your address and it's your utility usage data. And depending on where you are in the country, the way that you get that utility usage data, it can be different for each utility. But functionally, we're going to want to look at not just how much money you spend every month on the utility bill, but depending on where you are, there's different kinds of charges. There's time of use charges and demand charges. And without getting too technical on how all that works, you really have to understand the interplay between the solar generation and the timing of that generation and the utility rate tariff that you're operating under to assess what those savings look like, what the optimal system size is going to be in, and all of those sort of technical components. But for the nonprofit, it's pretty easy. It's what's your address and your utility data. And we actually have some tools that automate some of that process to make it real easy to gather that usage data.
So if I may add to that real quickly, Christy mentioned the fact that we needed to engage our facilities team because of their knowledge and to be able to understand and provide the information. I think another team that you have to engage from early on is your finance accounting team, your CFO, director of finance, whoever it may be. They need to understand what you're trying to accomplish because they are going to have to provide some data, or they have to go look for that data if they don't have it readily available. Because the key question at the beginning is this viable? Does this make sense? Is what going to be the cost going to be upset by the potential savings? And that's where they can be of Collective SunForAll can be of great help. But that's another team that has to be involved and understand that, yes, we're working towards it, and this is data that we're going to need and to be able to make things work.
And Lee, if you do want to comment on that, I mean, we both know that one of the key financial metrics here is that this thing is cash flow positive. So if you're saving $50,000 a year, on your utility bill because you have solar now, well, there's a loan as part of SunForAll. You want that debt obligation back to that loan to be under $50,000. So there's some net savings. And if Lee, you want to comment on that and maybe add why it's important to get a number of bids and to compare bids and pricing, because we want savings from day one on these.
Sure. So you're absolutely right. SunForAll is all about saving from day one. And in order to make that possible, you have to have a solar bid that has a system cost that can absorb a loan payment. And that loan payment had better be lower than that savings number. And so we need to validate all that information because we only want to do projects that are going to create savings from day one.
And we still have a few minutes here. We're getting close to wrapping up. So if anybody, for those of you still on the webinar, please ask any questions. I think we've addressed pretty much everything. So I'll just open it up for the last couple of minutes. Is there anything here that anybody would like to share? Lee, Christy, Moises, that maybe we didn't get to?
I just wanted to mention, I was just thinking about it as I was really even participating and listening to all of this. I know that we sometimes tend to be skeptical of things that sound too good to be true. This one is one that you don't have to be skeptical about. It is true, it is good, and it is really something worth looking into because I think that the model has been very well thought out, and it's really a win-win.
Well, we should really thank again the Bequest Foundation as a true partner in every sense of the word on this. It really makes this possible. So thanks again to Bequest. We'll hopefully have them back on the next webinar. Christy or Lee?
Just grateful to Collective Sun and Bequest. And again, this was it's a long journey. It doesn't happen fast. But again, communication is key, and we're really excited that we are on the home stretch of this project. So we'll send pictures for follow-up.
Thanks, and I just want to extend my gratitude and thanks also to Christy and Moises, not just for the solar project, but for what you do for our children in our communities. And I know that on a day-to-day basis, the challenges that you face. And I appreciate that, you know, we can play a small role to contribute to the financial sustainability of the organization. As Collective Sun, you know, we get caught up in KWH and spreadsheets and cents per kilowatt hour and things. And you know, what you remind us is that these translate to good things happening in our communities. And at the end of the day, that's what this is really about, in the mission that you're advancing in communities. And we're grateful for the work that you do.
Well, thank you to everyone, Moises, Christy, Lee. Let me peek over at my clock. I think it's just about 11 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up here. Everybody on the webinar, thank you for joining. We will follow up. We'll reach out and we'll send emails to everyone so they have a copy of this. We will post it on our website, and it'll also be posted on YouTube. Give us a couple of days for that, or at least 24 hours. Is typically how long it takes. So look for that follow-up email from us. And you can reach us at sunforall.com. And again, thanks for everyone's time. We're going to sign off. Thank you.